I'm in the big leagues, told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Said Connects. This is your host, Danny. Cannabis Entrepreneurial Dialogues. Our mission is to create spaces for people of color, brands of color, and minorities in the cannabis industry to be able to educate and empower our communities through storytelling and experience, and most importantly, through representation. I'm excited, as you guys been watching throughout the season. You know, shout out to all the different shops that we've been to, all the different locations that we've already, explored, whether it was Coast to Coast, whether it was Butter, 64 and Hope. Today, we're obviously at a different location. Today, we're at Telos here in downtown LA. We're with the CEO, Jake here, which we're going to introduce in a bit. But if you guys haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure to do so at Said Connects. Follow us on Instagram at CED_Connects for all the updates of all the upcoming episodes here in Season 3. And without that, man, we're going to get started. So, Jake, man, how you doing, Jake? How's everything doing?
I'm good, Danny. Thanks for
coming
coming
through. I'm going to need you to get on that mic, bro.
I'm good, Danny. Thanks for coming through, bro. I wanted to do a quick correction, though, because my partners would have me for that. Gotcha. I'm not the CEO of Telos. We don't really have a CEO right now. We're literally just 4 partners that run the company. So It's like think King Arthur's table with no King Arthur. You know
Gotcha.
I mean? Yeah.
Okay, so we got one of 4.
Yes.
The 4 horsemen.
There you go.
One of the 4 horsemen.
Exactly.
It's crazy because, and I've said it. I have the distribution company, and it's my partner and I, and we were this close. We're Rolling Valley Distribution, but we were this close to calling ourselves 2 guys in a warehouse.
Like 2 guys in a van.
Yeah, 2 guys in a van. 2 guys in a van. That was gonna be the name of our distro, but we were like, you know what? I don't know if people are gonna take us too serious if we do that. So
I would have rocked with you hard with that name, to be honest. Like, and I feel like the marketing, it goes viral a little bit. Like that could still be something you pivot to.
We can, we're just the beginning.
Get that IG page locked in right now.
But what's up, man? How you been, dude?
I mean, I've been very busy, as I think a lot of your viewers and your network can relate to, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, this industry is fast and furious, to put it lightly. Yeah. And, we just went through the holiday season. We just went through the new year. Right. A lot of us are doing a lot of things that I think are trying to build, actually. Like, what's crazy is, like, I feel like there's a narrative out there, like cannabis is failing. Like the industries, it's like, I even use it, admittedly, the analogy is a forest fire. Like, things are just bad, right?
Right.
And you know what's up. Like, people are challenged right now to make their things work, whether it's, where do I find good biomass that works? Like, where's the distribution solutions at? How do I get a sale on shelves when it feels like you have to pay to get in there nowadays? So there's just so much going on. But I like that there's still people looking to build in their portfolios, do more, continue to figure out what it means to be an entrepreneur in the space and navigate, the challenges that, we've all been forced to account for. So, like, I'm feeling positive going into this new year. Admittedly, last year was tough, I think, for a lot of people, So,
absolutely. Yeah. And you're right, man. And we'll definitely tap into that. But before we do, what we really like to do to start the show is learn a little bit more about you, your upbringing, where are you from, and what was the messaging behind cannabis in your household growing up?
Oh, okay. So we like to start with that. All right. Okay.
We got to, man.
That's deep. All right. I was raised kind of in a unique way, I guess. Like, I was raised, they call it a third culture upbringing, where I was raised actually almost exclusively overseas. Like, my dad had a job that had us moving every 2-3 years kind of vibe. And so, like, I was an American kid and my parents are from Jersey and Pittsburgh, or Philly and Pittsburgh, but I was being raised in Paris and Germany and Italy, like Asia, like all these countries. Like, that's where I was getting raised, and then I spent my summers in back in the States. So it was kind of a culturally, like, challenging upbringing, you know what I mean? Because, like, and like plus my father and my mother, I'm mixed race. Like my father's American white and my mother's a Korean, so like there was a lot of culture just like clashing and mixing and vibing going on in my life. So it was good. Like I vibed with Martin Luther King from day one, being raised in that upbringing, because I was like, yeah, we're all just one. I like, look at these motherfuckers. Like we're all just fucking one. Like that's clear to me. I'm being raised over here. Like, so like that shit was tight. But you don't get raised with lifelong friends. Like I can't say, oh, my homies from the block when I was a certain age, So like that shit was tough. As far as cannabis and how that was like related to my household, I'll put it like this: like I smoked one of my first joints in the presence of my mother, who's Korean, and we were at a Buddhist temple, and this like dude came up to me. He was like, and I was 15. I was definitely smoking by then. I was doing my thing. I was selling dime bags, but like I wanted weed, and she knew that. And he came up to me and said, "Do you want to smoke a joint?" I was able to smoke in front of her. It wasn't a big deal. She understood my relationship with cannabis was a healing thing. Like my dad died in an accident when I was 13. It was traumatic and shit. Like, so like she knew like I was trying to heal. And I think she even recognized, because my dad was an alcoholic and it related to how he died, like, that cannabis was going to be a safer outlet for me to heal with than like 40s, which I was also drinking with the blunt. So like, I don't know how it all really worked out, but the point is like, I think she thought it was a safer, more organic solution to heal from. So like in that sense, I think I had, a pretty, progressive, like upbringing around it. Like it wasn't looked upon as like a big deal.
Now at that time, were you back in the States at that time? Were you still overseas?
Actually, that time I was talking about I was in the States, but the first time I ever smoked weed, and this is something that like if you had not asked this question, I never would have talked about. So I appreciate the question.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah. The first time I ever smoked weed was in Malaysia. I was 13. And I was living there.
This is crazy. Like
in Kuala Lumpur.
This is insane.
Yeah. And so Malaysia, it's illegal. Cannabis is illegal. And the penalty, one of them, is death.
Oh shit.
For possession, intent to sell, like all that is death. And I remember, we were drinking. I mean, like the thing is about being raised overseas, like the parents are kind of busy. And so like you grow up fast. Plus like you're American, you look like 30 over there when you're 13 and shit. Like it's just a different world for 13-year-olds in these situations. Right. So I want to put that out there. Like it wasn't just me doing this shit. But I remember like the first time I smoked weed, dude handed it to me. And I'm like, what is this? He's like, it's hash and tobacco or some shit. And I was like, all right. And then he's like, it's weed. And I was like, oh shit, can't you get hung for that here? And he's like, I mean, not really. They just tell you to fucking leave the country in 24 hours and then you can get hung if you don't. And I'm all like, all right, light that shit up. Like that,
I got time.
I think that makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a risk worth taking right now. Like, I have limited value as a 13-year-old. But yeah, so smoked that, hash, and we did smoke weed in Malaysia too. It's terrible weed. I'm sure if I smoked it now, I'd laugh at that. But, it was getting me high, and it was something that So yeah, I first tasted cannabis overseas, but then thankfully by the time when I was 15 in Boston, where I was living, because when my dad died, I moved in with my mom, and she was in Boston. So now I'm all thrust into like the literal streets with my mom in Boston, and I'm trying to like recover culturally and all this shit. And so I dropped out of school, kind of like hung out on the street a bit, like realized there was some money to be made around selling dime bags in that particular area I was in. Like, so I was doing that. And
now, before you can keep going, were you always taught English to start, or were you learning different languages throughout your upbringing on all these different countries that you're at?
Embarrassingly, I'll answer the question with the end, which is I only speak English right now. Like, I think I speak it really well, but like I only speak English. But I was raised speaking other languages. Like I spoke French before English. But see, the thing is, culturally, like when you're taken away from what you think is your home culture, which I thought was America, right? Like I'm American. Like I never wanted to conform to wherever the fuck I was. Like I was just trying to be like, get the fuck out of here. Like let's just get back. Let's
and
just get back.
is that because you knew you were always going back and forth that you just didn't feel like you were at home?
I knew it was never gonna be my permanent home. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like this is shifting sand. Like I'm not gonna build sand castles. You know what I mean? Like so, it was not something that I think even back then as a kid psychologically I attached to myself to, and in fact I disengaged. I didn't want to learn fucking Chinese or Korean even. That's what kills me. It's like the longest place I lived was Korea, 5 years, right? Formative years, like 7 to 13 or some shit. Like my Korean identity is arguably one of the most important things in my life today, and has been for the last 25 years. But when I was that little punk ass kid living in Korea, all I could think about was how we weren't back in fucking Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? Like that's all I could think about. I was like, why are we in Korea? Da, da, da. And that's unfortunate. I'm glad I lived there, but like I wish I could have got my identity more shaped there. You know what I mean? Learned Korean. Like I could have way easily. But yeah.
But now we got Google Translate.
Yeah, shit ain't been working for me. Yeah, I feel.
All right. But all right, but going back to what you were saying now, you're in Boston
selling weed, selling and smoking it. That was always the balance to find when you're that young. When you got like $100 in your pocket and you realize that's gonna get you like fucking 20 dime bags to sell for fucking 200 or whatever it was. Like you realize pretty quick, like, okay, well I'm also gonna smoke some of these joints. So like you start like realizing and learning. Like that sounds kind of stoner talk, but like you start learning like P&L. Like, what does it mean to run a business and have profit and loss? Like, where are my costs? Okay, cool. When I'm on the cold streets of Alston, Massachusetts right now trying to sell some weed, like, yeah, I bought these shits for $5 and I'm selling for 10, but I'm not keeping all of that, right? Like, why? Because like I just bought a 20 pack of McNuggets down the street because I'm hungry on these streets. So now I'm spending money trying to sell weed, right? Now you got some people that are like, just hook it up this one time. Okay, now I'm doing losses that I don't see returns on ever, right? That goes on the red. And now you're dealing with like something as simple as your own consumption of your product, and like that's what we would call like internal loss in a warehouse or whatever. So like without me knowing it at the time, I was learning like, hey, like what does it mean to sell weed? Like what is that going to look like long term? And I obviously like that shaped me a lot because we were like caught up and like I was actually criminalized for doing that. I got arrested and like thankfully I wasn't like incarcerated. I was like a diversion program out of it, and I had
How old were you when that happened?
15. Yeah,
still 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is all a bad year, or a good year depending on how you look at it, right? But overall, like it really shaped me because I also realized when I was in a courtroom in fucking Alston, Massachusetts, just being like, am I really in a fucking courtroom right now for selling this fucking plant that's in this tiny bag and I sold fucking $5 worth of it? Like, it kind of blew my mind that the system has dedicated the amount of resources that were being dedicated just to manage me as a juvenile 15-year-old who wanted to smoke weed and share it with his friends, basically. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had a probation officer. Like, for what? That called me and checked in on me like when I was 15. Like, to me, like, when I was in that courtroom, you got a judge, you got lawyers, you got armed police officers, like all of these resources, and it was all over like a bunch of me's. And I saw people from my school in those courtroom halls. Like there were other kids getting caught up in the same bullshit. And like the amount of like, it's whatever on our side. You could talk through like, why did we do it? Is it important? Like blah blah blah. Like that's on us. Like on their side, it's like, why are you all spending this much fucking money and time to criminalize kids over something that your fucking grandmas are growing in their fucking yards and don't even know it and shit, So to me, like, I ended up sort of taking that energy into college when I went to Toronto, and I went to University of Toronto, and I majored in criminology, which is the study of criminalization. Why do we criminalize people? How did we get here? Like, why do we, why does...
Did you intentionally go for that?
Yeah. My whole idea was like, I wanted to either become a police officer that was going to be on some, like, I was in like this movie called Serpico. It's about Al Pacino, like inside the police department trying to correct it. fix it. You know what I mean? He ends up getting like iced out because he tried that shit, right? But like, I was thinking the same way. Like, maybe I can go from within and change this shit. Like, not let kids like me and my friends get caught up in that situation. Whatever, that kind of thinking. Then I thought criminal defense lawyer, blah, blah, blah. But either way, I studied criminology at undergrad because I wanted to understand like why exactly are people like being criminalized, and like to what extent is that something that we can shape differently because of the like I understand the impact of it, it's something that I've always tried to have a very high level of consciousness around, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Dang, that's a lot to unpack right there. But you went to school and you're in Toronto, and what's the relationship with cannabis like now in your life while you're going to school for criminology? Yeah.
So it was like the universe always wanted me to have a reason to engage cannabis, because once I got to Canada, beautiful place. Toronto's an amazing city. I encourage everybody to go to Toronto. And
what time of the year?
Well, now that Drake's there, you can go any time of the year.
Okay.
It's going to be a good time. And it's different. You want to see snow, and then you want to put the thuggies on and go out and have a good time, watch the hockey game, winter. You want to like see the, Jamaican reggaeton festival, summer, like it's on a lake. So it's just like pick or choose, like Chicago, Okay. It's on the other side of the lake So basically, like, as an American up there, again, like citizenship, identity, right? I'm in Canada. I'm not allowed to work visa. I don't have a work visa. I have a student visa. That's how I'm there. I'm only allowed to study. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to live? So,
I never thought of that. Like, I never thought of going to like college. Like that shit just went over my head right now. But
well, they let you get like a student job sometimes on campus, and that I did that shit in the library for a while, and that was okay. But like, I realized that wasn't gonna cover like how was I gonna have a good time and experience in college. You know what I mean? Like, so I was like, how am I gonna take somebody out to dinner kind of vibe? But I started. It was pretty quick where cannabis up there it was illegal, but it wasn't like criminalized the same way. Like there was no way you're seeing jail time for like having a couple ounces, you know what I mean? Like that kind of vibe. But it was still criminalized, so everyone's still hush hush about it and shit. Yeah. But it wasn't like ultimately you could be in county for 30 days because you had an eighth. You know what
year was this?
It's like 2000s, like early 2000s. Okay. Yeah. And so like, get connected with people that are growing and moving weight. Specifically everything there was indoor, grown by like Vietnamese organized crime, quite frankly. And like, there was only one strain they would grow. It's called MS like 39. And I was like, why is this the only strain y'all motherfuckers are growing and shit? Because I knew there was good shit in Canada, because I finished my high school after I got in trouble in Boston. I finished in British Columbia and Vancouver, beautiful places as well. That place's relationship with cannabis is like Christianity and Israel and shit. Like there's some origin stories about weed and cannabis that go to British Columbia, like the genetics and all of this West Coast stuff started up there because the legal and the palette for like the climate for it's been so much more friendly over the past 100 years or whatever. And so like I knew there was great weed in Canada. In Toronto, all you could get was the worst shit you would ever want to smoke. And they were like, oh, it's MS-39. I was like, stop fucking growing it. Like grow something else.
How far in like comparable to like the US and states and shit, how far is Vancouver or Toronto to District of Columbia?
So Vancouver is literally on the West Coast, so it's like, like by Seattle, right? And then so it's like saying Seattle, like and Toronto's by New York. So it's like East Coast, West Coast, But the Vietnamese were saying we grow MS-39 because it takes 39 days from seed to it's in your back, right? It was like an auto bloomer or something. It just grew fast. Yeah. And again, you learn early lessons on the traditional market about how things are going to go in the legal market later. What drives production decisions? Even on the streets back in the day, 39-day strain over a 45-day strain, let alone a 60-day strain that's exotic. Everyone always wants exotics, right? You always hear people say, well, it's a traditional or in the licensed market. It's like, well, why don't you have all the exotics? Like, why don't you grow? Why don't you guys sell or grow? And then they'll insert like 16 Sesame Street character names or whatever the fuck is popular right now, Like, so like, it's like, they always ask for it. And what they don't realize is like, Yeah, for the same reason, like whiskey companies and wine vineyards can't just give everyone reserve, because like there's a special amount of attention and process that goes to growing that type of material. So you can't just sit there and be like, why isn't that all you got? Because that's impossible, because it would break the model, because people actually have to make money before a 60-day harvest or whatever it is, you know? Sure. So like, you know, I was again learning early like what it was gonna take to deal with some of the challenges that later on, like I knew like we would be seeing in the legal market, but at the time you just don't know.
Right,
you know?
Right. Dang. Okay. Yeah. So you have MS 39 available to you in college. Yeah. And then
yuck.
Well, yeah. What led you out here?
Yeah.
Once you finished college and continued with this?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little sick of the snow. Yeah, I was a little sick of the snow, and I was a little sick of the idea that I had to worry about weather at all as far as dealing with my day. Because at some point in Canada and Toronto and the colder parts of Canada, like, yeah, the weather's just going to let you know what you're going to do that day. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to just be able to do whatever you want to do. So and I wanted to come out to the West Coast again. I was American, so I had to come back to America if I actually wanted to work and shit. Yeah. I knew that I could hit the ground running here with cannabis because of my connections in British Columbia. I had a partner from high school that we had worked in the traditional side with. I spent a lot of time, building that relationship with him, and he said there was an opportunity for us to do some stuff between, British Columbia and California. Like if I came here, it would be a good decision because he's up in British Columbia. We could cover things. Yeah. And so, I did partially for that, knowing that would be here. But again, you have to figure out how to live life. Like I couldn't just move here as a 20-something-year-old kid and be like, oh, okay, well now I'm going to be that guy. Like I needed an identity. I needed to connect to community here and stuff. And so I started doing other things like working. I worked with juvenile and incarcerated youth as a part of like work with UCLA. So I was like forging an identity outside of moving work, and that's something that I'm thankful for, because like honestly, this has been such a grind that if that was only thing that had been forging my identity for the last 20 years, bro, like I'd be done with this. It's just, you've got to build value outside of the industry that it now is, and the commodity that is weed. Even if you love that shit, which I do, and etc., like you've got to figure out who you are as a person, and it's not just going to be, well, this is who I am as an operator, or this is who I am as a grower or whatever, But yeah.
So you started working with the youth.
Yeah.
What else were you doing? Music? You had a few things.
Yeah, I was working with music. So actually, that's I was like managing artists or aspiring artists at the very least. You know what I mean? Like and models or whatever. Like I was trying to like hustle basically. And anyway, I like the idea of I've always liked the idea of being able to make my own money and spend that money back on my own business, like control outcomes as much as possible.
So you never had like a traditional 9-to-5 job?
No. So part of the UCLA work was having a 9-to-5 job. So I worked at UCLA, and I'm very thankful for that job because like not coming from LA, being able to spend, I worked on and off at UCLA for 10 years. So like that's been a big part of forging my understanding of this community that is Los Angeles, because I worked with admissions, so helping kids get in, and working with certain impacted populations on the development side once they're there. Like I helped manage the students that were working with like the formerly incarcerated youth that were now on campus trying to figure life out, so I'm very thankful of my 9-to-5 because I was able to connect it back to meaningful things for me as a person in my community. But I'm gonna be honest with you, it just, if it doesn't pay a level of compensation that is required to live in the community that you're trying to service. That's what tripped me out. Like people working in public affairs in general. It's like they're from the community, they're here serving the community, and we are paying them just enough not to even be able to afford to live in this community.
That's real. That's real, because I used to work before coming onto the cannabis industry. I worked in early education.
Okay.
I worked with the babies.
Yeah.
And
sure.
And the preschool teachers made less than, elementary school or public age, K through 12, but yet 0 to 5 are the most impactful, they're the most influential times of their children's lives. That's going to help them strive as they grow. And we're putting so much into we're demanding so much from the educators.
Yeah.
Yet they're like the least compensated in the industry, and
it doesn't make sense.
I was in the same boat, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, fuck, this doesn't make, like, I want to be here. Like, I would like to, like, stay and work with the babies and work with the kids and the families.
Yeah.
But how can I stay here making $18 an hour, $16 an hour, but I can deliver cannabis and make $22, $25 an hour?
Yeah. I mean, come on.
And so for me, and I had a growing family at the time, I was like, I have to do right for my family as well. You know
No
what
doubt.
I mean? And so I get where you're coming from when it comes to that, man. So
it felt bad when I tapped out, actually, because I tapped out not that long ago, like pre-COVID, like right then or whatever. I was fully like, I can't do any work with y'all anymore. Like, stop paying me. Like, even though I'm working remote, like, y'all need to stop paying me because I don't have that extra bandwidth to even allocate, because the industry, right? Like, it just got to that point where I was like, okay, cannabis is really going 100 miles an hour right now. Like, I've got to be in the car. But before that, like, I was trying to manage both, right? But it got to that point where I was like, I'm dipping, I can't. And it felt bad. It almost felt like I was like leaving my, the team and just being like, I got to go make money, you know what I mean? Like, and so that I get, that's why I appreciate the people that are still in those fields doing that work, because it's just like they are sacrificing.
Yeah. Well, and do you also think you felt bad because maybe you found some type of identity and community while you were there and now you're leaving?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Like, knowing I'm not going to connect with those community members, consistently, at least ever again. Like, it's like a dissection, so it was rough, but I'm still friends with the people, like, obviously, like, UCLA and all those community people are home, and I to this day still want to find ways for cannabis to translate into those communities better. Like, I think a lot of the things I had time to do when, let's say, 3 years ago in this industry, like, I was doing, like, setting up apprenticeship programs to work specifically with system impacted, or formerly incarcerated people, like, it's, these are things that, like, I think can still translate really well. My wife, like, who's obviously in the industry as well, doing amazing work. Like, she definitely has, like, a lot of attention focused on that as well. But it's getting more and more difficult to balance what it means to stay operating, continue to make next month work as an operator, and figure out ways to, like, create opportunity on top of that. Yeah. It's almost like the analogy I would say is like, it's almost like on the like, if you look at, like, social equity or the work that like community impacted initiatives that can plug into cannabis, like, that type of work is about getting people on the ship, right? My thing is like, the ship is literally maybe sinking like in 2 minutes, so, like, let's just make sure I'm not literally adding to the victim count that is about to be the ship at the bottom of this ocean. At least this ship, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know about all those that are in deeper water, but like, this ship, let me stabilize it. Let me see what it means to, like, see the next day sun on our faces again, and then let's talk about what it means to, create more opportunities. Because I think that, and I mean, this is getting a little deeper than maybe I was trying to go with it, but, like, my thing, social equity though, right? Like, it's just something that we've all, like, and social impact, like, these are all things that, like, have really been tossed and, like, in and exchanged as a point of value and contention in the space since the beginning of this. It's been discussed. I don't think there's a lot of trophies on the wall. You know what I mean? Like, if we walk through, like, the Hall of Fame of social equity right now, like, who's our success stories? Who are the people that we're saying they did it right? This is what should have been done, etc. I think you've got a lot of people that could do this. I did it right. I think I did it right or whatever. That's fine. But like collectively as a community of people who give a shit about that and in this industry, how many of us are aligned with what won and what translated well when we started talking about social equity? I would challenge people to just like to offer that up because I don't have any. I don't have any. There's nothing out there that I would be proud to say, oh, you see that right there? That's the perfect model. That's something that we should have all got behind. It just doesn't exist for the most part. And like for me, it's like that's a tremendous loss. And that's something that needs to be accounted for. It's just we need to like create stability so that we can account for it. You know, like that's the new sort of impact. It's not just like, what does it mean to understand the work? What does it mean to understand social equity? I think a lot of people understand it now. We've talked about it so much. Absolutely. You can't have 26 symposiums about this and not start to understand what the fuck they're saying. Like, we understand what the fuck they mean. Like, why isn't the work being done? It used to be because there's a bunch of white men with money that don't want it to get done. I don't know if that's the only reason anymore. That's what I'm saying. Like, now it's like, well, we've got competing parties within the community, but what it means to lead social equity and take these resources, that's complex. That's not just point at dudes with money that shouldn't have it. Now you're looking within. Now you're saying who should get this, who shouldn't. Like, that's real talk that not just anybody can do. So, like, my hope is that, you know, those that operate and continue to drive success into the industry at the commerce level, at creating, you know, brands that can work and sell and be available to people that want it. Something as simple as what you and I do, bring products that people want on time so they can get it. That is not easy, y'all. You know what I'm saying? Like, that shit is not easy.
You're right. It's not, man. And even with like me and working with other operations and other manufacturing companies, like, I see how I operate, I see how I do things, and then I see how others, and I'm just like, how?
Yeah.
How do you maintain? But you brought up a lot. You brought up the work that you're doing, you know, and we're referring to Telos. How did Telos come to be? How did you become on the operating tip? How did you become an operator in the space?
Yeah. So that was related to like my high school friend David. Shout out David Cool. Like, me and him go back all the way to high school, and we'd been working together at some level or you know, throughout that. Part of what we did right before things went regulated legal, when was that? About 5 years ago, we were running a Coachella Valley delivery service that we were able to get a license in the city of Rancho Mirage. Shout out Rancho Mirage, that rich little city in Palm Springs. Like, we found out from my lawyer, like, oh, there's an opportunity to get a license to deliver only to Rancho Mirage residents, because Rancho Mirage didn't like the idea that Outward In was coming and they weren't collecting taxes on it and didn't have visibility. And I was like, wait, you're telling me there's a city in California, and this is before, you know, everything went legal, is going to give me a license that says I can deliver to their residents, and it's going to say like City of Rancho Mirage on the permit? And it's like, yeah, we should get it. And I was like, yeah, we should get it. So I got in a suit, went to the City of Rancho Mirage, which is like in the Palm Springs area, met with like their compliance officer and some maybe council member or something, went through the application process, got this thing. And I realized when we got this delivery license, I was now allowed to legally, according to its own city, deliver to Rancho Mirage residents cannabis that I simply had. And then I realized, I asked my lawyer, how would they know if my driver was going to a Rancho Mirage resident or not? Like, what if they were going to a Palm Springs resident, which is 12 minutes away, but then they got pulled over by a police officer, and they said, what are you delivering this cannabis for? And he showed him the Rancho Mirage city permit saying he was going to go deliver to Rancho Mirage. What would the coverage there be from a legal standpoint? My lawyer looked at it and said it would be pretty fucking good. And so basically we just like expanded delivery throughout the Coachella Valley. So we had a delivery service called Green Coyote, and we delivered from Palm Springs all the way to Coachella, so the entire valley, under like an hour. And so like I often look back at those times being like, man, if you ordered in Coachella or Palm Springs, my drivers were getting to you within 60 to 75 minutes. I don't know how, but they were. And then like you've got all these big fuck off delivery companies right now that are like really struggling to hit like real time delivery, so they're going when it's scheduled and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to the idea, like some things, it depends on the operator doing it, but some of these things, these problems that we're seeing come with scale, like when you got to do 300 deliveries in a day, like shit gets hard. You know what I mean?
And when you had that operation going, how many people did you have on your team operating this?
It was like me and like 2 to 3 hardworking people. It was like a tiny ass team. Sometimes it was just me and my manager and the driver. Sometimes the manager was the driver. My manager was rolling around strapped up, and I remember being like, can you stop doing that? Like, it's really like against the whole idea of me having a fucking legal permit as you being strapped up. And he's like, and he lived in Desert Hot Springs, which is like the equivalent of like, Palm Springs if it was on an episode of Gangland, basically. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's just like, he was just like, yo, like, I live here, like I'm from here. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, I'm not delivering to nobody this weed unless I'm feeling comfortable. And I just had to like embrace things like that to operate. Like, it wasn't something that I was like informed enough about to make the decision. But we operated with a very small team.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so then you had the delivery service. And when did that transition from delivery come to distro?
So I was working more on the operation of the delivery and all of that, while David, my partner, was working on the biz dev side. How do we connect this opportunity to something greater and beyond this? Which he met what soon to be our future partners at Telos. He met my partner Tony Kim, who comes from a fashion background. He is like one of the co-founders of like Hudson Jeans, Drunken Monkey, like apparel lines. And then we met, Dan Penrod, who's one of our other partners, who's like a background in, finance and just like, a bit of like a financial, like, extraordinaire. And so we started putting together like a team that was all looking at cannabis as an opportunity to translate our collective values into, right? Me and David coming from a cannabis perspective, and then you've got, Tony coming from supply chain with fashion and apparel. Sure. You've got finance. So we just came together and like started something, and we put a little money into the market. Like, we invested a little bit of money in a company called Ease, which is obviously grown into quite a delivery platform. And that company we helped operate. We weren't comfortable just like putting a little money, and it was very little money. That's all we had. But like putting a little money, so we want to be able to help that grow. And so we opened up Ease depots in Los Angeles and Oakland and operated that for years, and like was a big part of developing their statewide delivery platform to this day. And then we
That's huge.
Yeah. No, and it was huge. And then they effectively wanted to start owning their own stuff, and so they acqui-hired us a bit, where they took Tony in, and he became the president of like the CEO of Stacks, which was like their cannabis logistics company. Sure. And then I stayed on the outside operating out of here, Wilson Street, and we did distribution and private label manufacturing for Ease, which started flooding their their shelves with their own product, like a couple of their own brands, and we made and took that throughout the state from here as we grew.
That's crazy, because one of my first like jobs in the legal industry was I applied to Ease.
Oh yeah,
and I was a delivery
driver. Yeah,
out of Green Goddess in Venice.
Yeah, in Venice. Yeah, sure.
And I loved that job because it was the fucking, what's the word? The ice cream truck model. So I had the little case, and I would just pull up. I would drive out to Santa Monica, like further past the pier, and I would just sit there, just watch the ocean, hit the waves crashing
until you get pinged.
Wait till I get the ping, and then I'm like, all right, cool, let me go make this delivery, and I just drive right back to the spot, and it was like the easiest like 8 hours of my day of just chilling. Yeah. And
I knew that's what the driver's day always looked like. Unfortunately, I was at the depot being like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with driver Danny? Fucking, like, why is he not moved off this Venice fucking street for 10 minutes on the map? Like, this dude is killing me. Like, so I was dealing with like the chaos inside the warehouse. But yeah, the drivers were always an interesting collection of people.
Yeah,
you know what
I mean, I loved it. It was fun. And it definitely like propelled me into other avenues, but that's crazy that like I'm sitting with the guy who got this got that whole operation up and running.
Part of it, yeah, a big part of it. It's something that we definitely take pride in. We haven't made a lot of money doing anything we do in cannabis. That's a common story for, I think, most people in cannabis. Like, if you've talked to most people in cannabis, I don't care how big the company they work for is or what they do, like, most people have not made a lot of money doing this, and that includes me and, unfortunately, my partners. But, you know, we're trying, we're trying to stay alive and, like, figure out what it means to evolve and, like, figure out the next chapter. And there's new markets opening up, and I think as these new markets open up, like New York, for example, which my wife was just visiting to check that market out, like, it's something that hopefully, if they do things more sensible than happened here, or can learn from some of the issues that have plagued us, then, like, my hope is that we can then learn from them almost again, or at least regulators can, and people who can make our lives easier.
We hear that a lot. Like, if they can learn some of the issues from here. Give me an example of one or two of those issues for our listeners to, like, have like a little better understanding of that. Yeah,
I think understanding the relationship first and foremost with regulatory bodies and the operations and the operators, the licensed operators, like, to what extent do you need to regulate this industry should be something they have conversations about before attempting to regulate them. And I would say in California, our industry is regulated at a similar level to how, like, pharmaceutical manufacturing and distribution is regulated, and firearms even. And I would say in worlds like firearms, there's more flexibility than there is in cannabis, actually. And so, like, I just think, like, where cannabis is getting put in, like, our society's view of to what extent should the state regulate and then tax, right? Because that's the other part of it. It's like, oh, we're going to regulate this thing, and because it costs us to regulate it, we're going to tax y'all to regulate it. And it's just like, well, how about y'all just don't regulate it as much as you think you have to? Like, why don't you all spend more time regulating things that you really should, like education in your state, versus like trying to over-regulate this particular industry. But that being said, like, I would say that's first and foremost. And then, like, other things, like something as simple as, like, look, how does licensing work? Who's getting licenses? In what order? What does it mean to open up licenses in a market that doesn't have opportunities and resources to translate that into something real? Like, LA's got a great example. My wife and countless other social equity applicants have been issued the right to open a store. And LA prides itself on talking about how they've given this opportunity to so many, social equity, community-focused people. And it's like, at the same time, there's no property available, y'all. Like, there's no resources to help these people secure these properties to turn them into retail establishments. And so, again, there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of people pointing to supposed wins, like that one I just mentioned. But if they're not translating into something as simple as those people being opening up one store, then, like, I think there's some lessons to be learned,
For sure. Okay. Now, with the operation that you have going on with distribution, explain to us some of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day as a distributor. Do you take on brands to distribute for them, or do you work, like, what's that look like if I was a brand and I wanted to be distributed by Telos?
Right. So, I work in a few different spaces right now, even including in distribution. Like, I've just, we're at Telos's distribution center here in LA. We also have a facility in Northern California, but I also work with a company called LeafLink, running some of their operations distribution wise. So they have a totally different sort of model. And if the answer is, like, how would somebody, work with them, I could definitely, you could reach out to me. If you're a brand looking to get distributed statewide through a platform as robust as, like, LeafLink, then, like, definitely.
What is LeafLink?
So LeafLink is a cannabis focused tech company and product and platform. So they have, think like Amazon, you create a marketplace. So LeafLink has a marketplace, has consolidated retailers and brands and, everybody to be able to exchange and order, from each other in the network. And then LeafLink has spent a lot of time also financing through factoring a lot of this activity. It's not always easy to pay COD and things like that. So LeafLink has, a finance division that has a financing program, factoring program that puts a lot of money into the marketplace so that people can actually, make things happen. Right. And then they've launched a logistics division, which I help run here in California out of LA, where it's more like, okay, here's a warehouse solutions company that is connected to LeafLink, that's able to, perhaps using some of the value that's already come from the marketplace play, like translate into the distribution play. So LeafLink is, just like anybody else out there, like Nabis or, some of the bigger outlets, is looking to take on more and more of the business that's sort of getting reshuffled, I would say, right now in the state. Yeah. But to bring it back to Telos real quick, because I think that's a simpler story, and for brands that are trying to understand how easy it really is, it is really easy. Like, what's not easy is our job. Like, okay, now we have your work. Now we've got to make sure it gets to these customers in this order. That's all logistics, real talk, and that's hard. Their job of like, hey, here's my brand. Hey, can you guys get some flour to put in this? Hey, can you pack that and have it ready to sell? And then that part's all easy, right? Like, I would say that that's something that anybody out there with intention and a budget helps, like, could start a brand right now, connect with people like you and me who have licensed manufacturing and distribution facilities and bandwidth, and can do. I do this all the time. Like, I have people like with one-offs, like, hey, I want to just put a brand. I have 4 stores. I just want to sell it to those 4 stores and be done. It's not a money-making move for me, like, or Telos, but it's certainly like, I like that, again, going back to what I said to start this thing, I like that people are continuing to build new things, try it, we'll see what works. And if I can be a part of, like, making that happen, like, I'm interested in that. So, like, if you want to do distribution in the state, you need to work with licensed distributors like ourselves, but it's probably not that complex outside of that. Once you connect with somebody like, you, Danny, or myself, it's pretty straightforward how you can. Now, look, go convince stores to buy your stuff. That's a totally different story. Like, I don't know nothing about that.
Absolutely. You're right there, man. You're right.
But we can hold that inventory for you, for real.
just go ahead and keep pay that storage.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Man, so I follow you on Instagram. And you're not shy about your lifestyle. What I truly admire and what I love about, like, following your page is the relationship you have with your children, and all the different outings that you guys are always going on. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'll tell you, it's the power of Instagram, because, like, that is not, unfortunately, the relationship with my kids because of cannabis. And, like, this is real talk. Like, I was just talking to Tamika this, like, this industry is asking so much of us to be so invested and dedicated to the work right now that, like, I typically, my work day is like leaving before they go to school, and it is coming back at bedtime. And so actually, my daughter's primary relationship with me is me walking through the door and her being like, is it time for you to put me to bed? Which crushes my soul, because, like, now I'm associated with just lights out. You know what I mean? Yeah. But power of Instagram, like, when I have opportunities to do something with my kids, like, I definitely try and, lean into them. And it's funny because, like, I mean, this, I don't know, like, this is, we'll see how people feel about this statement. I feel like I post on Instagram more for myself than for anybody else. Like, for me, it's like my own personal notebook where I'll look back on that shit. Yeah. Like, people be like, why you look at your own shit? It's like, but that's why I put it there. Like, it's just a better platform for me to read. Like, what am I going to go in my photos and see 12,000 fucking videos? Like, I think that's not managed well. Like, inventory is like my memory inventory management software. You know what I mean?
Right. And I kind of do the same, because I love getting those, like, the notifications of like
3 years ago today. I'm fire, bro. Yeah,
I love those.
Yeah.
You know, I only go on Facebook now just to hit that memory tab.
Yeah, for sure.
See, what did I post 10 years ago?
Yeah,
or like, you know, all that shit.
Yeah,
so I'm with you on that because
Yeah,
I do the same thing, and I take a lot of pictures. Like my personal page, it's all just my kids.
Yeah.
And so that's why one of the reasons why, like, when I see you and doing those things, like, it's fucking dope and I love it. But the reality, like you just brought up, coming back at home, I'm not there just yet. Like, my day is like, I take the kids to daycare before I enter the warehouse, and then I try to leave the warehouse at a reasonable time to where I can still pick them up and handle like the rest of the day with them. Yeah. So I'm not there just yet, but I know that eventually it's gonna get there one day.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, hopefully some of the shit stabilizes, you know. But you know, my kids, like, ultimately are what, like, also drives me to be that dedicated. And so, like, it's like sort of a circular relationship, you know, where, like, I feel like if it wasn't for my kids, I would not be hustling this hard. Like, come on, what the fuck would I be doing? Like, I'd be posted on a Venice street looking at the sunset too for a little longer, bro. Like, that's what I would be doing. Maybe I'd catch a couple Grubhub deliveries. Like, I don't know. Like, I'd chill out a little bit. Yeah. But, like, and also, like, my son is 7 and he's been diagnosed with autism, and we've had that in our lives since he was 3. And so, you know, I know, you know, like, I need resources long term to make sure he's good, and that's a big part of what drives the work that me and my wife do, and the motivation. So yeah, it's all about the kids, man.
Absolutely, man. Last question for you, man. How do you feel being a Canna parent and, like, out and about? Like, do you like let people, like, let's say out on the fields or you know, as you're interacting with other parents and maybe they talk about their day at work, are you the parent that, like, will say, oh yeah, I work in cannabis, or do you kind of shy away from those types of conversations from anyone outside of this industry?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say that you play it by ear. Each scenario is different. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me put it this way. Like, I largely am pretty transparent. If you follow me on Instagram, you see me blowing probably like 20 blunts a week on the stories. Like, I am, like, definitely transparent about who I am, how I consume, what I do for a living, all of those things. Now, if it's like we're on the field, a soccer game, and, you know, one of the kids' parents ask me, what do I do? I'm going to look him up and down. If he looks like, you know, he votes a certain way and we're all good, like, he might hear I'm in, you know, supply chain, I'm in cannabis. Sure. If it's like, oh, there's a low-key chance they're into Trump, like, they're going to get, I'm in warehouse management solutions business, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to lie about who I am, but, like, to what extent they hear it, like, I'd say I'm pretty transparent, though. But, for example, my daughter's best friend, my daughter's best friend, my daughter's 5, like, her best friend, her father is a police officer. And I remember thinking, like, when I didn't hear that until they were already close. And then all of a sudden, like, the nanny's telling me, like,
you gotta put everything away.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, Amaya's friend's dad's a cop, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, and she's there a lot, huh? And then I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, okay. Then I told, like, my nanny who takes care of my kids, I was like, let's just make sure we don't tell that cop what I do, you know, like, because I don't think that's going to help my daughter's relationship with his daughter. Like, if I'm not going to hide things or lie, but, like, I'm also not going to make my kid's life more difficult because I do what I do, you know, like, so you got to play it by ear, but, you know, you also got to be yourself. So lean into being yourself and being honest. And then if you got to once in a while tell someone, you know, I'm a logistics guy, like, just say that shit.
You're into logistics.
I'm in sales. You know what I mean? Like,
you're not
botany.
In sales. You're in logistics.
No, I'm saying for other people, right? Like, if you ask somebody else, all they say is I'm in sales, or I'm in botany, or I'm in soil quality management. You know what I mean? Like, call it what it is. Like, it's all real work. You know.
If you had one piece of advice for someone tapping into this industry, what would you say?
I was totally gonna do this like run away right now thing, but like that's not even how I really feel. Like I was, that's a bad joke, but like that was my answer for a while. Like people would be like, "So Jake, like I'm thinking about," or I have a friend who's thinking. I was like, "Don't stop talking, actually, and walk away from this situation really slow, and maybe you'll get out okay." But like now, my answer is like, if you're trying to get in, figure out the why first, because like if you're trying to get in and you start asking yourself why, and the answer is because you want to make a ton of money really fast, yeah, like let's talk about that before you make a decision. I'm happy to talk to somebody about that decision, because this is not a gold rush. This is not tech company boom. Like this is a different animal that I think doesn't produce those results necessarily. And so I would tell those people that they need to think about why they're trying to do this now. And if the answer is because I have an understanding of what it means to do it, I've tapped into some people who are doing it, I've studied this a little bit, I've worked in the industry perhaps a little bit, and I realize I can do X, Y, Z differently, and I think it can be better, and it can make things even better, I'd be like, get the fuck in.
Cool. Yeah.
Run in here with purpose. You know what I mean? Like, because that's what we need. We need millions of those people, or maybe hundreds. But like, we need those people, right? Yeah, not millions. But like, the point is like, if the answer that you ask yourself when you ask, why do I want to start something or do something in cannabis, seems to be one coming from the heart that relates to something realistic, like your experience translating well, run it. But if it's on some like, oh, because it's always seemed so cool and mysterious, like, yeah, get a job in the industry first and like see how mysterious like your first shift bud tending at some retailer is, and see like, you know, how you feel from anything from like, you know, the customers to the feedback to the managers, like, or whatever issues like any retailer deals with in any industry. Like, I think you've got to get that magic mystique part off. Like, do you still want to do it after you, like the new car shine gone? You still like your car? You still want to do it? Because that shine goes like that, you know, like, but yeah, I encourage more and more people to look at this industry as an opportunity though, and not as, you know, a death pit full of vipers and snakes, because that's not what it is. It's just, we've largely got problems that every industry and every commodity and everybody has, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. And I appreciate that advice, and it's one of the realest advices I've heard in a minute. So I really appreciate that. You got any shout outs you want to give out to anyone? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, okay. Again, like, I'm not like a content creator or whatever, but I do have an IG, and Danny loves my account, so that's a good sign. It's at Jake G Wiz, which is JakeGeeWiz. You can obviously follow my wife's brand and my brand Biko at Biko Flower. And other than that, like, big shout out to Danny for doing this. This is the type of stuff that like people, you know, need to want and volunteer to do in this industry, to capture a lot of this value and community building. And, you know, I know that this took a lot of work, you know, shout out to your team and the man behind the scenes here and everything else, because like, I do think that these, you know, I'm not trying to say my stories are important to tell necessarily, but I think it's important to capture what community looks like. And this is another great way of doing that. So big ups to you guys, and shout out. Thank you for coming out today.
Thank you, man. And for myself, as always, my shout outs, I shout out my girls every episode. So what's up, Dalia? I love you. Rosie, I love you. Faith, I love you, girls. Shout out to you guys as always in every episode. And again, for our viewers and listeners, make sure to tap in, subscribe to our YouTube channel at CED Connects, CED Connects. Follow us on Instagram at CED_Connects. And with that, we're out. See you guys.